I never expected to be standing there, property deed in hand, asking everyone to leave the house I bought. My mother's face went pale as I said it. "This is my house, and I'm asking you all to leave." The party fell silent as I faced the family who had always treated me like an afterthought. I was born in Sacramento, California, in a 3-bedroom house with a red brick walkway. Sounds peaceful, right? But inside those walls, I was nothing but a shadow, forgotten in the glow of my older sister Victoria. She was 9 years older than me, already the golden child before I could even speak. Mom used to tell neighbors while holding me, this one was a surprise, but we were already complete with Victoria. She'd laugh like it was just a harmless joke. But I heard it loud and clear every time. I never forgot it. My dad was a civil engineer, always exhausted after work. My mom taught elementary school, coming home drained. And either surprise child was always the reason behind their weary sighs. By the time I was 5, I was used to my dad telling my grandpa, "You wanted her, didn't you? Then you take care of her." That line came like clockwork every morning when my grandparents picked me up. The keys would jingle in his hand as he walked away, never once looking back at me. My grandparents' house was only 10 minutes away, but it felt like a whole different world. It smelled of freshly baked cookies and had my grandma's gentle eyes watching over me. I called it my real home. There my name was spoken with affection, not annoyance. My grandpa, a retired math professor, would tell me stories about how numbers could speak. Truth lies in numbers, not in sweet words, he'd say when I got confused by my first charts. After study sessions, Grandma would sit with me at her old wooden table, correcting my spelling with purple ink. "You know, Jen," she'd say, "knowledge is the one thing no one can ever take from you." I nodded, even though I didn't fully understand yet. But I knew what love felt like, warm, unconditional, without judgment. Meanwhile, at my parents' house, I was a stranger. They didn't openly dislike me, they just didn't notice me. If I came home 5 minutes late, there might not be any dinner left for me. Parent-teacher conferences usually had an empty chair where they should have been. I wasn't angry about it. I was just used to it. Victoria's birthdays meant big parties, 3-steered cakes, and even a small band in the backyard. For me, a single candle stuck in a storm and a spot cake. I didn't expect much, just once from Mom to ask what I wished for before I blew out that lonely candle. But that never happened. Victoria never acted like she hated me. She just never really saw me either. When she stretched out on the sofa chatting with friends, I'd sit in the corner quietly playing with old dolls my grandma had given me. Once I tried starting a conversation with her. She just replied with a distracted yeah and turned away. Message received, I didn't belong in her world. My parents didn't hide their favoritism. At every family gathering, they couldn't stop bragging about Victoria's achievements. Vic got another A in history, or Vic was picked to lead the spring festival committee. As for me, no one asked if I was keeping up with school, if I had friends, or if I'd ever won any awards. They were too busy basking in Victoria's glow to notice I was growing up too. I used to think that once Victoria left for college, my parents would finally notice me. But I was wrong. So wrong. When Victoria left, I didn't get more attention. I just got more chores. That's when I started to understand my presence had never been truly welcomed. I wasn't part of them, I was just a responsibility they couldn't deny. I don't know how many times I swallowed the lump in my throat just to avoid crying in front of them. But thanks to my grandparents, I learned to be strong. I learned to quietly remember everything and use that pain as fuel. Because one day, I'd walk out of that house as someone who chose her own life. I was 14 when Victoria officially left for her freshman year at Boston University. The day she wheeled her suitcase off the porch, Mom cried like she was going away forever. Dad kept saying, "She's grown now. A girl like Vic is bound for success." And me? I stood in the kitchen doorway, dish rag in hand, completely invisible. I thought things would change after she left, that my parents would finally see me. But no, they didn't see me more, they just saw what needed doing. That same evening, as I was heading upstairs to do homework, Mom called out, "Jennifer, do the dishes and clean the kitchen, okay? I'm tired." I stood frozen at the sink, hot water running between my fingers, stinging. Not from the heat, but from something else, a feeling I couldn't quite name. I knew this was the beginning of something unfair with no way out. Every afternoon after school, I wasn't allowed to set my bag down until I finished the to-do list Mom scribbled on a sticky note. Clean the stairs, vacuum the living room, do the laundry, fold clothes, check expiration dates in the fridge, prep dinner. If I missed one task, Mom would say, "You live in this house, you should help out." Vic was never this lazy. She said it so often I thought I'd misheard her if a day passed without the comparison. I knew every setting on the old washer in the basement. I knew how to season roast chicken just right for Dad. I memorized Mom's favorite snacks for her late-night TV marathons. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. Once I asked if I could skip dinner prep to study for finals. Mom said just one thing, I guess getting an A is more important than feeding your family, huh? I didn't answer. I quietly went to the kitchen, left my books on the desk, hands shaking as I chopped onions. I singing but holding back tears. On weekends, while my friends were at movies or hanging out at the mall, I was scrubbing bathrooms or mopping floors. When I asked Dad if I could join the school's academic team, he waved me off, finish your chores first. That stuff's a waste of time. So I started staying up late to study. My bedroom light glowed past midnight. One time Mom came in and shut it off, saying coldly, go to bed. If you're tired tomorrow, who's going to do the chores? My room was small, tucked at the end of the hallway next to the storage closet. The walls were thin so I could hear the TV from the living room every night. My parents laughed during game shows or Mom chatting on the phone about Victoria. She's just been chosen for an internship at a big marketing firm. She's amazing, Mom said proudly. She really is our pride. And me? I stayed quiet. Only my grandparents still called every Sunday night, even though they were both getting frail. They asked how school was, if I was eating enough, if I was happy. I always smiled and said, I'm doing fine, even though nothing felt fine. But I didn't want them to worry. One night, after finishing my chores and studying until I was drained, I pulled an old shipping box from under my bed. It held Grandma's handwritten letters, birthday cards, and photos of me with my grandparents at the park. I flipped through each one, searching for a part of myself in those rare, peaceful days. One card had her handwriting, "You're a little light. Keep shining patiently. One day the whole world will see your glow." I clutched that card tight. No one in that house had ever called me their pride. But I wouldn't let life pass without someone ever seeing my worth. I started researching scholarship programs online. Every night, after all the chores were done, I opened the old computer and scoured university websites. I didn't know what was waiting out there, but one thing was certain: I was going to leave that house. Not to escape, but to truly live. And I would live on my own terms. I got acceptance letters from 3 universities all at once on a rainy Wednesday morning. The feeling of opening those thick envelopes, my fingers trembling as I read congratulations, Jennifer, I could hardly breathe. I did it. After all those years of quietly enduring, studying, and serving like a shadow in my own home, I had my ticket out. That night, I laid the 3 letters on the dining table, hoping for one small moment I thought I deserved. A look of approval, a simple well done, sweetheart from my parents. But when Mom glanced at the envelopes, she just shook her head and went back to clearing dishes. Dad didn't even look up from the TV. I need to talk to you about tuition, I said, gathering all the courage I had. Mom let out a long sigh, like I'd just interrupted something important. Jennifer, honestly, we can't help you with that. I stared at her. But I thought you had her college savings fund. She set the plate down and wiped her hands on the dish towel. The thing is, we used that money to pay for Victoria's wedding. You know, an outdoor event in Santa Barbara isn't cheap. There was the band, the flowers, the 5-course dinner. I swallowed hard. The wedding had taken place nearly a year ago, lasting 2 days, complete with fireworks and a live band. I had served guests the whole time, arms bruised from carrying supplies, while Victoria looked like a princess straight out of a fairy tale. Now I knew where that money came from. But I'm your child too, I said softly, barely recognizing my own voice. Dad, still glued to the TV screen, said just one sentence you can take out alone. Kids these days all borrow to go to college. That's what being an adult is about. I stood there, overcome by a cold, stinging feeling. They didn't reject me loudly, they just never considered me at all. That night I pulled out my phone and called my grandparents. Grandma picked up. She heard my voice and immediately knew something was wrong. Sweetheart, why do you sound like you're about to cry? I didn't hold it in anymore. All the tears I had ever pushed down came flooding out. I told her everything about getting into college, about the 3 acceptance letters I'd laid on the table, and about my parents' cold refusal. On the other end, I heard Grandpa clear his throat gently, then his voice came through, slow and steady. My girl, don't worry. We've been preparing for this day for a long time. I blinked. What do you mean? The day you were born, he continued. I opened a savings account in your name. At first, I just wanted to set something aside in case you ever needed something important. But the more I saw how your parents treated you, the more certain I became you'd need this to build your own life. The next day, my grandparents invited me over. On the table was a thick envelope filled with bank documents, statements, savings books, and a detailed plan for covering college expenses. You can choose any school you want, Grandma said, holding my hand tight. Don't ever think you're not worthy. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, but because for the first time in my life, I felt like someone truly believed in me. Not because of achievements or expectations, but simply because I was me. I moved in with my grandparents just a few days later. My parents didn't protest. They didn't even get up from the living room when I carried my suitcase out the door. Mom said one sentence I'll never forget: do whatever you think is best. I wasn't sure if she felt relieved or just didn't care anymore. But I knew one thing: I was leaving a place that had made me feel small and invisible. It was the first fall where the air actually felt fresh. I chose Stanford University. I majored in finance. I made a decision: if they dismissed my worth, I'd make the world recognize it. And I began on the very path they never imagined I could walk. I set foot on Stanford's campus on a misty morning, both nervous and excited. Everything there was big, modern, and challenging. And because of that, I felt like I belonged. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the unexpected child or the one who stayed home while her sister shined. I was Jennifer, a finance major with a dream no one could take away. At first, I was overwhelmed. My classmates were brilliant, from elite high schools with family support and connections. I arrived with 2 suitcases, an old laptop, and a childhood full of hard-mind concerns about discipline and resilience. But I quickly realized knowledge doesn't care where you come from. And I had something not everyone did: a burning drive to prove I deserved to be there. I studied day and night, read twice the assigned materials, joined investment analysis clubs, and attended every workshop I could. By the end of my freshman year, I was selected for a special mentorship program for high-mogul potential students. My mentor was Mrs. Keller, a former investment fund director in Chicago, known for her sharp mind and tough standards. She told me in our first meeting, the world of finance doesn't favor the faint-hearted. You have a quiet exterior, but your eyes say otherwise. I didn't let her down. The summer after sophomore year, I landed an internship at a financial firm in San Francisco. By junior year, I became the only student in my cohort invited to an investment conference in New York. During financial analysis project presentations, I stood before dozens of investors, mic in hand, heart racing but mind clear, voice steady like never before. Professor Carson, who taught behavioral economics, once told me after a presentation, "Jennifer, you don't just have the skills. You have the presence of someone who will change the game." I graduated summa cum laude with a full -ride scholarship, receiving multiple job offers. But I knew what I wanted. I wanted to go to New York, the place where billion-dollar financial decisions are made in towering offices, where I wouldn't be chasing someone else's spotlight. I'd make my own. I accepted a job at a major investment bank in Manhattan. In the early days, I worked until 2 or 3 a.m. analyzing reports, checking every figure, adjusting every strategy. I didn't complain. Compared to years of cooking and cleaning without recognition, at least here my effort was rewarded with real opportunity. In my second year, I got promoted. In my third, I led a North American market analysis team. When I entered meeting rooms, I no longer looked down or avoided eye contact. I walked in as someone who knew what she was doing and knew she deserved to be there. During those years, I had little contact with my parents or Victoria. They rarely called, and I didn't reach out. The only updates I got about them came through phone calls with my grandparents. They were always there, calling weekly, asking about my work, sending homemade cookies on holidays, and writing little handwritten notes like, "You're our shining star, keep glowing." I often wondered if not for them, would I have had the strength to rise out of the swamp of my childhood? Probably not. Because it was them who planted the belief in me that I wasn't invisible, that I was worthy of love and recognition. I moved into a small but modern apartment on the Upper East Side, with windows overlooking Central Park. Every morning, I brewed coffee, watched the rush of people below, and reminded myself I got here on my own. No favors, no permission, just my own strength. Life seemed to be on a beautiful path, but I didn't know that the past would come back in the most unexpected way. And when it did, I'd have to face not only the people I left behind, but also the wounds in my heart that never truly healed. I was preparing for a Q3 investment strategy presentation when my phone buzzed. The caller was my grandfather's doctor. A vague sense of dread crept down my spine. I apologized to my colleagues, stepped out of the conference room, and answered, "Jennifer, your grandfather was admitted to the hospital this morning. He had a sudden heart attack. We did everything we could." I didn't hear the rest. My ears rang and the sounds around me faded into nothing. Everything blurred like someone had drawn the curtains on my life. 3 hours later, I arrived at St. Joseph's Hospital in Sacramento. The room was stark white, the smell of disinfectant sharp, the empty hospital bed unbearable. My grandmother sat beside it, her eyes lost, wrinkled hands clutching a frayed handkerchief. "He went quickly," she said, voice hoarse like the wind. "You were the last thing he mentioned before he passed." I couldn't hold back my tears. The man who taught me how to read financial newspapers when I was just 10, who took me to the park every Sunday afternoon, who believed I could change my life, was gone. After the funeral, my grandparents' house became hauntingly quiet. Everything in it remained the same, as if he might still walk out of the reading room and ask, "Would you like some tea?" But the air felt different. My grandmother seemed like she had lost her soul. She tried to stay composed, to smile, but the deep hollowness in her eyes betrayed the loneliness she carried. 2 months later, she passed away in her sleep, peacefully, just like the way she had lived. The doctor said there was no serious illness, only that her heart couldn't carry the weight any longer. Like me, she didn't know how to live without him. I returned to their old house to sort through paperwork and arrange her funeral. While going through old envelopes, I found a letter addressed to me in that familiar shaky handwriting. Inside was a notarized copy of my grandparents' will from 3 years ago to our beloved granddaughter Jennifer. "We leave the house at 324 Maple Drive and $120,000 as a thank you for bringing light into our later years." I was speechless. The place that had been my only safe haven growing up was now the final gift. They left me a final affirmation I wasn't an afterthought in this family. I was someone they had chosen to love. The reading of the will took place in a lawyer's office in Sacramento. My parents sat on one side, silent but clearly expectant. Victoria was busy on her phone, while I quietly sat across from them. Mr. Jenkins, the attorney, wore glasses and read the document in an even tone. When he reached my name, he paused slightly, as if to emphasize the house at 324 Maple Drive and the entire savings account of $120,000 are left to Ms. Jennifer Collins. The air turned instantly cold. My mother gripped my father's sleeve, and Victoria let out a sharp breath, almost panicked. No one spoke, but their eyes said everything. "I understand this might come as a surprise," the lawyer continued, but the grandparents made their wishes clear, with a special note addressed to Mrs. Margaret, Jennifer's mother. He opened a smaller envelope and read slowly, "Margaret, we once gave you $180,000 to help with Victoria's wedding, right when you needed it most. Now please respect our final decision for Jennifer, the granddaughter, who was always there when we needed someone." For the first time in my life, I saw my mother lose her usual composure. She turned away, hiding her disappointed expression, but said nothing. Victoria gave a short, bitter laugh and stood abruptly. "Well then, congrats. You've always known how to win people over." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Those words no longer carried any weight. I didn't need their validation anymore. My grandparents had already given me that, in a way no one could take away. That night I sat alone in the old living room, staring out at the garden where my grandfather used to read. October in Sacramento was starting to bring a chill. I told myself this place wouldn't just be filled with memories. I would turn it into a new beginning. I had no idea that the very people I thought were out of my life were about to return. And this time they weren't coming out of love. They were coming with demands. It took me nearly a year to heal from the loss of both my grandparents. The house at 324 Maple Drive was now full of memories, yet so empty that it made my heart ache every time I stepped inside. The old photos, the teak cabinet, the hand-me-downs embroidered tablecloth, all of it seemed to beg me to stay. But I knew my grandparents wouldn't want me to live in the past. One early spring afternoon, with soft golden sunlight spilling through the windows, I sat at the dining table, flipping through documents, deep in thought. This house had once sheltered me, but maybe now it was time for it to become a doorway to something better. And then the thought hit me, unexpected but clear. I would sell my grandparents' house and use that money to buy my parents a new home where they could spend their retirement comfortably. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Maybe gratitude? Maybe a shift in the way they saw me? Or maybe it was just a part of me that still couldn't shake the need to be accepted, even though I knew that might never happen. I called my parents one weeknight. "I want to meet you this weekend. It's something important." I heard a brief hesitation from my mother. What's it about, Jennifer? I'll tell you in person. Let's meet this weekend. We agreed to meet at a small cafe in the suburbs of Fremont, where they were living in a cramped apartment after retiring. Dad looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him, his hair fully gray. Mom still wore her familiar stern expression, but her eyes showed signs of weariness. I began, trying to keep my voice calm. I've decided to sell Grandma and Grandpa's house. And I want to use the money to buy you a new one. Something small, one story with a garden. Easy to maintain. They stared at me in shock. For a moment, I thought I saw Dad's eyes glisten, something I had rarely seen. Mom put down her teacup, her hands slightly trembling. You're serious? I'm not joking. The silence hung for a few seconds. Then my mother suddenly started crying. Not loudly, but quietly, the kind of tears I'd never seen her shed for me. We don't deserve you, she said between soft sobs. Vic is unemployed. She and her husband are always fighting. And you've always been so strong and still thinking about us. I didn't know what to say. I just smiled gently and handed them a printed list of the houses I'd been considering. 2 weeks later, we chose a small home in Pleasant Hill, a single story ranch mob with a backyard full of lavender and large windows looking out at maple trees. My mother said, "It feels like a place to start over." After the deal closed, my father hugged me for the first time since I was a child. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Not for the house, but for not giving up on us." I nodded and simply said, "I think that's what Grandma and Grandpa would have wanted to." Right after that, Mom began planning the housewarming party. "It has to be grand," she said, her eyes lighting up. "We'll invite everyone, flowers, a buffet, a photo wall." I nodded. "Just let me know when you need help." "Oh, don't worry. I'll handle it all. You're busy with work, just relax. Just make sure you're there that day. I want you to look your best." At the time, I thought maybe things really had changed. Maybe for the first time in years, I was truly part of this family. But I had no idea that the very housewarming party I wasn't invited to would be the turning point that revealed everything. And this time, there would be no forgiveness. I started to feel uneasy when 3 weeks passed without a formal invitation to the party. Every time I called to check in, Mom would just laugh it off. "We're still planning. You know how long these things take." Dad would give vague answers. "Let your mom finish organizing. Just make sure you show up." But no one gave me a specific date. I was busy with work in New York, so I didn't dwell on it. Until one Friday night when I opened Facebook to look up a potential client and accidentally typed Victoria Collins into the search bar. Even though I never added my sister on social media, I could still see the public section of her profile. The first post that popped up left me frozen. "Can't believe the big housewarming party is this weekend. The new place is truly a dream come true. Can't wait to show it off to everyone." Below the caption was a series of photos. A long banquet table draped in white cloth, flowers everywhere, sound equipment being set up, and boxes labeled Victoria stacked by the front entrance. In the background, I clearly recognized it, the house in Pleasant Hill that I had bought with the money from my grandparents' house and my own savings. My world tilted, my hands stiffened on the mouse, my heart pounding like a countdown clock. Not a single word of invitation, not one heads minus up. And yet, my entire family, including Victoria, her husband Andrew, and their twin kids had moved into that house. And now they were celebrating it as if it were a shared family achievement, while the person who made it possible was left outside. I couldn't sit still. The next morning, I flew back to California, rented a car, and drove to Pleasant Hill. I parked a block away from the house and could already hear the music and laughter in the distance. People were coming and going, string lights hung across the porch, and cars lined the street. I recognized a few familiar faces, relatives, old neighbors, even some of my high school teachers. No one knew I was standing there. I quietly walked along the side path and opened the side gate to the backyard. The scent of lavender from the garden hit me like a wave of memory. But it no longer brought warmth like it did on the day I handed over the house, just a bitter taste in my throat. Through the kitchen window, I saw my mother placing pastries onto a tray, wearing the silk blouse she once said she'd save for a truly special occasion. My father was chatting with a group, holding a wine glass, boasting we're very lucky. Vic helped a lot with the down payment. It was a family effort to get this house. I froze. Victoria stood nearby, holding her son and smiling brightly. Mom and Dad deserved home like this. We just did what needed to be done. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. None of them mentioned me. No one acknowledged the fact that the entire house from the roof tiles to the floorboards was paid for with my money. I stepped in through the back door, my voice oddly calm. How strange. Everyone seems to have forgotten who actually bought this house. The crowded room fell silent. All eyes turned to me as if I were some uninvited stranger. My mother dropped the tray of pastries and Victoria's eyes went wide. My father was the first to speak, his voice uneasy. "Jennifer, you're here. We were just about to invite you." "Really?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Then why did I find out about this party from Victoria's post? And why are all her family's belongings piled up in this house?" My mother took a deep breath and changed her tone. "You make it sound like we've stolen something. This is a family home, not owned by just one person. Vic helped a lot, you just don't understand." "Helped?" I pulled a copy of the property deed from my purse and held it up. "I am the sole owner of this house. No one else contributed a cent. No one asked for my opinion. Yet the family threw a housewarming party without inviting me and built an entirely different story around it." Victoria stepped forward, trying to stay composed. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We just thought Mom and Dad needed a place and this house is the best fit." I didn't respond. I turned to the crowd and spoke softly, but clearly sorry to interrupt, but I am the legal owner of this house. And I'm asking everyone to leave. Right now. No one said a word. In that moment, the bright lights and cheerful music seemed to shrink away. I stood in the middle of the home I had purchased with hope for connection. And all I saw was a betrayal deeper than any insult. And that's when I understood some doors, once opened, can never be closed the same again. The silence in the house was almost absolute. Only the soft music from the speakers outside continued to play, awkward and ironic. I stood in the freshly painted living room, holding the certified deed in my hand. My name, Jennifer Collins, clearly printed at the top. No one could say a thing. My father blinked and shook his head, like trying to dismiss a bad dream. "You're overreacting, Jen. This is a family home. You're just holding the title." I looked him dead in the eye. "What did you just say?" "Holding the title? This is my legal property, bought with my money after I sold the house my grandparents left me. The one you never paid a dime to maintain. I took you house hunting, signed the contracts, handled all the paperwork, and today you throw a grand party without inviting me, while letting Vic move in like it's hers." My mother stepped forward, pale but trying to stay calm. "We're family, Jennifer. You can't let paperwork override blood. Think about it. Vic's kids need a home. Your father and I need stability too." "I'm not arguing about that," I said, my voice firm. "What I can't accept is the lying claiming Vic contributed, leaving me out of something I created through memories and sacrifice." Victoria crossed her arms, eyes defiant. "If you give it, you can't take it back. You're being petty, Jen. A home is meant to be shared, not owned like a prize people are expected to grovel for." I took a deep breath, resisting the urge to laugh at how easily she twisted things. "You're right. A home is meant to be shared, but not with people who don't appreciate it. I was going to let everyone live here, really, until I was shut out of my own home and saw my family rewrite the story without me in it." I turned to the scattered guests on the sofa, in the kitchen, down the hallway, neighbors, relatives, old friends. "I'm sorry to disrupt the party, but I believe you deserve the truth. This is my house. I never gifted it, never signed it over. And I don't permit anyone to move in without my consent. Not even family." I turned back, my voice now low, but I scolded. "So I'm asking all guests to leave now. And Mom, Dad, Vic, I want all three of you out within 48 hours. I'll involve my lawyer if I have to." Victoria stepped forward as if to argue, but Andrew, her husband, grabbed her arm. He whispered something I couldn't hear, but his face had changed. The confidence was gone. No more smirking. My mother looked shattered. "You can't do this. We're family. Jennifer, please don't let it go this far." I tightened my grip on the documents, the anger now replaced by a familiar cold, the feeling of being dismissed, excluded, then blamed for daring to demand acknowledgement. "No, Mom," I said. "This time I can. And I will." One by one, the guests began to leave. Some looked at me with pity, others avoided my gaze entirely. I didn't blame them. They weren't the ones who pushed me out of the family. They were witnesses to the moment I stepped out of the role of the quiet daughter. Victoria was the last to leave the living room, holding her twins' hands. She glanced at me one more time. The pride was gone. Only bitterness and disappointment remained. "You'll regret this," she said softly. Family isn't something you just throw away like a toy. I didn't respond. I stood on the porch as they drove away, the party lights dimming behind me. The house felt quiet, this time for real. But inside, I never felt more certain. For the first time, I had defended myself. 2 days after the interrupted housewarming, I returned to the Pleasant Hill house with a strange emptiness inside. The front yard was cleaner than ever, no more cars, no decorations. The house was mine again, just like I intended. But the price to reclaim it was a deep cut through what I used to call family. My parents, Victoria and her family, had moved out quietly. I wasn't there when they left. I had left the keys in the mailbox and asked my lawyer to oversee the process. They returned to my parents' old apartment in Hayward, which barely fit 2 people, now crammed with 6 my parents, Victoria, her husband, and their 8-year-old twins. I didn't need to imagine how suffocating it must be. And it took just 1 day before the messages started pouring in. First came a text from my mother, "You think I'm not heartbroken? What you did was cruel." Then a missed call from my dad's number. I didn't answer. Then Victoria, with a voice I could never mistake, "You think you have the right to punish us? But you're the selfish one." The messages kept coming all week. Sometimes they begged, "I know we were wrong, but you broke this family. Can't you undo it?" Other times they accused, "Your grandparents must be disappointed in heaven. This is the last thing they'd want." I read them all. I didn't delete them. But I didn't reply. I put my phone on silent, blocked all 4 of them, and set up a new email just for work and financial updates. The old inbox where they'd sent dozens of angry or pleading messages, I simply left unopened. I didn't cut ties out of rage. I did it because, for the first time, I saw what my childhood had blurred to them. I only had value when I served, when I stayed quiet, when I stayed behind someone else's light. But the moment I dared to be seen, to be heard, to be respected, I became the enemy. The house in Pleasant Hill was now eerily quiet. I hired a professional cleaning crew to scrub away every trace of the party. From tape residue behind the fridge to wine stains on the hardwood, I changed the locks, updated the security system, and reset all the lighting. I stood in the freshly painted living room, sunlight streaming through the white curtains, feeling peaceful. But not light. Some choices, even when right, still carry weight when you actually make them. One Friday afternoon, I drove past the apartment complex where my parents now lived. I didn't plan to stop, just wanted to see. Kids ran around the playground. A few adults sat under trees reading. I saw Victoria on the balcony, phone in hand, hair tied up. Her kids sat on the floor fighting over a tablet. My mom stepped out with a sandwich for them, then quietly went back inside. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. Just a brief sadness for what could have been if they had ever truly seen me as part of the family. I turned the car around and went home. That night, I began organizing my grandparents' keepsakes. In an old wooden box, I found a letter I'd never opened. It was from my grandmother, addressed to me. Inside were a few simple lines that made my heart crack open. "If one day you must choose between love and justice, remember we chose you not because you were perfect, but because you were. Never feel guilty for protecting your heart." I placed the letter back, feeling light for the first time in weeks. Family isn't where you're born, it's where you're accepted. And if they couldn't do that, I chose to leave so I could protect the gentleness in me before it was twisted by endless hurt. 2 months after the ruined housewarming, I signed the contract to sell the Pleasant Hill house. It wasn't a rash decision. It was the result of many silent, sleepless nights. That house had once symbolized devotion and healing. But now it held too many warped memories, too many twisted words, and misplaced emotions. I sold it for a good price, thanks to the rising real estate market. The profit, combined with my savings and income, allowed me to invest in a private fund, not just a financial plan for the future, but a foundation for the life I really wanted. Free, independent, and no longer seeking approval from people who never really saw me. I moved into a small penthouse in Tribeca, Manhattan, with a balcony overlooking the Hudson River and soft morning light filtering through the blinds. Not extravagant, not flashy, but mine chosen and built with real effort. Each morning I got up early, brewed coffee, opened the balcony door, and wrote a few lines in the old leather journal my grandmother gave me. Some days I wrote investment plans. Some days I wrote about my grandparents, the only people who ever believed in me without conditions. And sometimes I just wrote one line: "Today, I'm okay." And that's worth something. I haven't spoken to my family since that day, though occasionally there are emails from my mother, a few missed calls from my father's old number. I've learned not to open doors that only bring pain. I'm not angry anymore. But I know this: with some relationships, forgiveness doesn't mean continuation. I started dedicating time to things that made me feel real. Speaking at financial empowerment events for young women, writing about personal finance, and most importantly, I founded a scholarship in my grandparents' name, the Henderson Grant for Daughters of Silence, for girls who were overlooked by their families but carried dreams like I once did. One day, during a podcast interview with a colleague, I was asked, "Jennifer, if you had a daughter someday, what would you teach her?" I didn't hesitate. That she doesn't have to outshine anyone to be loved. That in her home, no one will ever feel like an outsider. And that her mother me will always be her first defender, not because she's perfect, but because she's hers. I never wanted a family early in life. My past made me wary of the word family. But now I feel more ready than ever to build a home not built on blood, but on respect, kindness, and unconditional love. I know I won't repeat my mother's cycle. I won't compare my child to anyone. I won't use silence as punishment. I won't burden them with expectations that aren't theirs. I'll love my child with everything I lacked. And more. One day, while walking past a small bookstore near my home, I saw a book with a cover that made me stop. No one is extra when they write their own story. I smiled, placing my hand on its spine, like I was looking into a mirror. I was once the child no one expected, the forgotten one, my sister's shadow. But today, I'm the author of my next chapter, written with ink of faith, paper of determination, and titled with my own name, Jennifer Collins. And if you ask me what the biggest lesson is from everything I've been through, I'd say never let anyone define your worth. Not even the people who gave you life. Family doesn't start with blood. Family is where you're chosen, loved, and seen. Fully, unconditionally. And in the end, I chose myself. And that's the best choice I ever made.